Apple pushes the return to offices back to 2022. Will this affect product releases? And history leaks from Apple about an iPhone Nano. So yes, Apple has pushed the return back to the offices back into 2022 because of the surge in coronavirus cases, specifically the Delta variant. And into a memo to the staff sent by Human Resources retail head Deirdre O'Brien, they added that the company does not expect to shutter their offices or retail stores, but she strongly encouraged staff to get vaccinated. This is according to Mark Gurman. And of course, this seems completely reasonable. This is exactly what you would expect to be happening, to keep the offices closed while you don't want people all together, gathering, spreading the virus between themselves, because that could just cause even more problems with more people having to isolate. But is this part of the reason that Apple's product lineup has been delayed? It's not just purely due to manufacturing issues, but also actually getting the products developed properly, because when people aren't working together, when they're not working in person, it does make life a lot more difficult to try and get these products out the door. I think it's interesting, but at the same time, it's also one of those things that it really can't be helped at the moment. This is just what needs to happen. So regardless of whether it does delay products or not, I think Apple's made the right move here. And next up, the iPhone Nano was going to be a thing. So while the Epic versus Apple trial appears to have been a pretty colossal waste of time, on the plus side we've had a bunch of Apple history leaks, which I think has been pretty awesome. Apple has always played it pretty close to the chest in terms of what they have under development, and looking back to 2010, there were almost no leaks until that one Apple engineer went to a bar, forgot their iPhone 4 prototype, and it ended up in the hands of Gizmodo. Things were so tight in security at the time that even though the release was imminent, nobody believed that the iPhone 4 would look like this, even though the physical hardware was right there in their hands, because it was far too ugly to be an Apple product. You know, the iPhone 4 almost universally acknowledged as the peak Apple design, with the current iPhone 12 range taking definite design cues from it. But back to the history leaks, it turns out that in 2010 Apple was also working on other sizes of the iPhone, with Steve Jobs referring to an iPhone Plus model in 2011 emails. But Plus was actually an amended version of the iPhone 4 with a new antenna design, faster processor and new cameras. What would become the iPhone 4S, introducing Siri to us for the first time. The more different size one would have been in fact called the iPhone Nano, with Johnny Ive, Bob Mansfield and Greg Joswiak assigned to the project at the time, according to the email leaks. Apple would have gone in the opposite direction to the rest of the industry, which was about to move to bigger displays, and even Apple would relent eventually and give us the extra ½ inch on the iPhone 5, moving to that 16:9 aspect ratio for the first time, with the iPhone 6 generation bringing wider iPhones and the first chunky boy Plus models. But given the relative failure of the iPhone 12 mini, do you think that an iPhone 4 Nano could have worked? Let me know down in the comments. And do you remember that everyone was talking about going smaller at the time? Even back to things like the Zoolander movies, they were talking about the tiniest little phones in the world when they had the flip ones. But let me know down in the comments if you think it would have worked. And let's get into some iCave answers. Bruce Grubb asks iCaveDave, you've said that USB-A is effectively dead on the Mac. Is the reason the Mini still has it for all the wired keyboards and the like out there? Do you think, given the power of the M1, do you think Apple will allow later Minis to use target display mode to drive pre-retina display iMacs, or will we be stuck with clunky third-party workaround alternatives? Okay, I do think that, yes, USB-A on the Mac Minis is probably there mainly for people that are bringing a wired keyboard and mouse, because the whole point of the Mac Mini, at least in the first place, was it would be a bring your own keyboard, mouse and display kind of setup, so that you could easily move over from one of those honking Windows towers to the elegance of a Mac. And yes, a lot of people do still use wired keyboards and mice. I used to, until very recently. When I first got this set up, I was using a mechanical keyboard and a wired mouse. I have finally moved back over to the Apple accessories on my desk. But yes, a lot of people do, and it just gives a much easier way for people to get involved in the Mac for the first time. Now, in terms of target display mode, no, I don't think that's coming back anytime ever, to be completely honest. If they were going to, they would have done it already when M1 arrived, but there's no way that Apple would put the time and resources into making it work on hardware that is at least sort of 8 years old at this point. The pre-retina iMacs, it is just not something that's worthwhile to actually put the time into developing, sadly. Duke of Kidderminster asks, iCave answers, do you think Apple Card will ever be available in the UK? This is a tricky one because finance in general is just an absolute pain. Goldman Sachs don't really do much in the UK, certainly not really consumer facing in the way that they do in the US, and they are Apple's partner for Apple Card. So if they were going to do it over here, it would probably be a Barclays card. And I think the problem is if they introduce it in other countries, every country has such different laws on what you can do with consumer finance, different kind of customs. There's a lot of credit cards here in the UK don't have any kind of membership fees. They don't tend to have all of the advantage stuff that you get in the US, because most of the stuff that you get as an advantage in the US, consumer protections and insurance and things like that, we kind of just get for living in the UK anyway. So a lot of the advantages that you would get in the US for having different credit cards, we don't really get over here. So I don't see it unfortunately happening. I really want one of those titanium cards though. Evan Rogers, iCave answers, how many daily views do you think you will need to make the channel a full-time job? Now, YouTube is a funny old beast. It's not just based on how many views you get, but what kind of audience you have giving you those views, and all sorts of other stuff, because based on the demographics of the people that are watching, where they're from, what kind of thing they're into, dictates how much the advertisers will pay to get in front of those people. So right now it's nowhere near. We've had a few months that were sort of approaching half of what I would need, and then it's obviously dropped down a lot with the news drought. So right now it's not a practical thing. Certainly if I was doing it purely on views, I would definitely need to bump up the view count. If we were to get the view count regularly to the best months that we've had, which was March this year, when we were talking about that event that then didn't happen, it's possible that I would be able to get more sponsors on board and do some stuff along those lines to kind of bolster it. But in terms of pure views, we're probably at maybe a quarter of what we'd need to be at to make this a full-time job right now. Now, there's always other options, so we could go along the Patreon route, YouTube memberships, but I don't honestly know what I would do to give the extra value that I feel I would need to for that. But if you guys have any suggestions, I'm very much open to it. Eugene King asks, iCave answers, is the M1X Mac Mini being pushed back to 2022, or will it be released before the end of this year? Again, very difficult one to have a read on. There hasn't been any really reliable sources on this. I know that the guys over at Max Tech, Vadim, was tweeting about this the other day, and I think he was saying that their information said it would be, but there's been nothing from Mark Gurman that said it will be. In fact, Mark Gurman's latest that I've seen from him very much says that it will be released shortly after the MacBook Pros. So it's very difficult to know at this point. I'm not going to commit either way. Master Gavalchek, iCaveDave, my uncle from the UK used to make tea by putting 3 fresh bags into a single cup every time. I bet that's stronger than any coffee you ever drank. Hashtag iCaveChallenge. It really isn't. I don't even use a teaspoon when I'm putting my instant coffee into the mug. I just kind of pour it in out of the jar. I drink really strong coffee. Eric Tipton, iCave answers, will Final Cut Pro 10 or 11 be coming to the iPad Pro M1 and forward, future models, or not at all? Honestly, if Final Cut does come to the iPads, which I think it will do in some form or another, it will be on basically every iPad, I think, that currently supports iOS 15. I don't think that they're going to cut it to being just the Pro models. I think there will be certain features or certain ways of working with Final Cut Pro that are probably exclusive to M1 based or M1 or newer based iPads. But remember that the A14 and the M1 share common cores. It's just that the M1 has more of them. So I think it's mainly going to be a rendering time difference. I think at that point you are going to struggle with some of the features, maybe 3D text, just like if you have lower levels of RAM on a Mac, then that can't do all of the rendering stuff. Like if you had a 4GB Mac, you couldn't run 3D text on Final Cut. But I don't think it's going to be super limited. I think it's just going to be a lot slower on exports. HVAC DIY asks, iCave answers, if I buy Final Cut Pro 10 now, to avoid the possible subscription system they might change it to, will it upgrade to Final Cut 11 when it comes out, or will I have to pay to upgrade it? Now, there's no evidence that Apple's going to take away the option to buy the system outright. There's no evidence that Apple will not allow you to still buy it. There's no evidence that if you do buy it now, that you will avoid the subscription system. So we don't really know. I'm not going to tell you either way. But in general, when you've owned a piece of Apple software, you've always got the updates on it. They don't actually charge you to upgrade from Final Cut 10 to 11. Just the same as when there's GarageBand updates that come out or anything else like that. Everyone that has the software is upgraded automatically. Now, in the past, if you go way back, I think Lion might have been the last OS that was a paid upgrade. I think that was $29. But I don't think that that's going to be the case. I think if you own Final Cut Pro, you will have Final Cut Pro. But I really don't know, is the honest answer. And it might not even be called Final Cut 11. We just don't know yet. That's my assumption, though. Okay, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you've got a question you would like me to answer in a future show, hashtag iCaveAnswers down in the comments section, and I will make sure I get to it. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.